Hi and welcome back everyone. I wanted to do a video focusing on some advanced video techniques, and in particular this came up because I recently did a workshop through our foundation sponsored Student Success Technology Grant, and Sarah and Kata did a really great workshop for us. And it was really an opportunity to kind of challenge myself and to do some things in a way that maybe added, if you will, to the end product. Of course, as I'll say throughout this video, one of the most important things, if you're creating a video that is a workshop and something that you're trying to preserve into the future, one of the most important things is having great content and having great speakers. And we were so lucky in this case to have Kata and Sarah because they're really known for the kind of amazing immersion that they create in all of their classes. In particular, this focus was on DE classes and how to make these classes welcoming. So I wanted to take this opportunity. I'm getting ready actually to take this rather massive project off of my computer, and this just gives you a sense of all the edits involved in one of these videos. And so every square or box that you see, this is an edit. And in a lot of cases, I'm using multiple video files. We had some quirks on here that came up, if you will, just because of audio issues, and so I was able to go back in and deal with some things like echo and take that out in post-production. So I'm going to go through some of these techniques with you today. In the case that you're thinking about upping your game or doing something a little bit more, say, than just sharing with someone the video output from, say, Zoom. And indeed, I did use Zoom in this video, but I also supplemented that with my own camera. So this will hopefully give you just a sense of maybe some of the complexities involved and how time-consuming working on a video can be, but also how rewarding it is, because even though you have great content, it's just like a concert. So you go to a concert and you might have the most amazing band in the world, but if your mix and sound engineer folks on stage, backstage are not doing their jobs, then in a lot of cases, you don't appreciate that concert as much as an audience. The same thing can be said when you have compelling speakers like Kata and Sarah. You still want to make sure that the video and audio decisions, as well as some of the other decisions with titles and so forth, are made in such a way that you can complement their expertise and great content. I've seen so many bad videos out there, where the audio isn't good or the video is super boring and people just don't want to watch those videos. So it's another kind of compelling reason I'll say to you today that you should really think about upping your game in terms of doing video and audio work for your workshops. If you're doing professional development work like I am in my job, these are some opportunities today that I'm talking about to really think about making sure that you have the best content, but also have the best output, the video and the audio at the end. So I'll go through some tips here and then kind of give you the key points, and you can kind of consider these. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about today deals with additional technology. I have videos on some of this technology, so if you're curious, just get in touch with me and I'd be happy to give you some additional tips or opportunities to learn about this. So the first thing I'll say is that you definitely want to have speaker preparation. So one of the cool things was before this workshop, I met with Kata and Sarah privately on Zoom, on the phone, and we just went through what they were thinking about doing. And of course the content was great and I knew it was going to be good, but I just made some suggestions to them about, well, what about this and this? And indeed in the Q&A, some that came up and the speakers were better prepared. One of the things I love in doing a video or a workshop is if I know ahead of time what exactly the organizers want from me. So as much as possible, if you're doing the audio and the video, also think about just that pre-preparation and working with your speakers ahead of time to make sure everybody's on the same page. The other thing this helped me do was to figure out an audio and video setup. So I really wanted to make sure going into this that I could set the room up correctly. And I just jumped to my Twitter feed here. I was trying to find this photo. So I was just advertising the workshop before it happened on Twitter and Facebook. And that's another tip really, is to think about doing some preparation for your workshop in terms of advertising. I think it's important because if you want a lot of Q&A at the end, particularly if this video is being preserved in the future for people to watch, the individuals who participate in the Q&A can really add to the content and create some opportunities for new conversations or synergy to develop during the workshop, particularly in the Q&A session. So here is the setup here. So we're in Sarah's and Kata's office, and I knew I wanted to have 3 microphones, so each of them have a high quality XLR mic. You can see 1, 2, and then 3. This is my own little setup. I'm running my laptop here. It's not a huge setup, so I'm using my laptop along with my Zoom R20 recorder, which I purchased on my own. It wasn't purchased through college funds, but I knew that this would be important for me to use in my job and also in some aspects of my musical work. So this allows me to run these 3 microphones in. So I have each of the speakers' audio on the different audio track. Those are WAV files I download after the fact. And then this allows me, and you can see what those WAV files look like in here on these various speaker tracks. So I have a C for Kata, S for Sarah, and SC for me, for Scott. And so that allows me to really control the audio to make sure that I don't have any bleed. If I do have an issue, say, with Sarah's audio here, if there was a hum or something, I could use the scratch audio track from the Zoom recording. So I actually have redundancy here, which will be another one of my points today. But at any point, if there's a sound or something that happens with one of these microphones, there's built-in redundancy, and there's also isolation of your speaker's audio tracks. Very important. Any of you that do recordings, I'll talk about this later, but if you have audio where you record through the air, particularly with a long distance between the speaker and your microphone, then that's going to create really bad audio. You're going to pick up a lot of hums. If you have fans in a room like here, or you might have air purifiers going in these different places, any of that might be picked up, particularly if your camera is here and the camera is also producing the audio. As well, a lot of cameras don't have very good microphones in them to get great audio. So this is why I use my XLR microphones, my really good microphones, some Blue and Shure microphones, and run those into my really good mix recorder. So that's kind of the setup to show you what I was working with. So again, that pre-preparation with my speakers really allows me to see exactly what is to be expected in terms of the audio and then the video quality. Now, and not just quality, but production issues. The other thing is I'm going to recommend is here I have some tracks. So this is an audio track that goes along with my closing title, which just directs the viewer to my website and to check out more videos. And then I also have an opening track here, which typically will have a nice title. I've created this in Canva. Titles, closing titles, and credits are really important for your videos. It gives your video a professional look as well. When you're creating your thumbnail on YouTube, one of the tips I would give to you, kind of a pro tip out there, is when you go to YouTube and someone is searching for one of your videos, if your title has really good pop to it in terms of the graphics, if it also has large fonts, because sometimes people, I used to do this in the past and learn from my mistakes, people will sometimes put up thumbnails that have really small titles. And I actually have a couple on here that are bad examples of that, but like these here, but I'm actually using those for a different purpose. But when you click on the video that I created for this, you can see the thumbnail is going to pop up here. And it looks small, but it's actually quite large. So I use that as my thumbnail. So typically what I do is I will take a screenshot of this or save this as a JPEG file if I create this on Canva. It does have some motion to it, the title, and then that is going to become my graphic. I really wanted super busy graphics just because of this grant. So if you're wondering why there's all this movement and stuff on the screen, I deliberately wanted a lot of stuff going on the screen. So I just recommend that you do titles, that you do credits, that you throw in some audio. You can get a lot of great audio out there that is free, royalty free, that you don't have to create on your own. I do create all the audio on my own, but it adds a level of professionalism to your videos. Now, the other thing I'll tell you is make sure, please, 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 focus on good audio. So I already mentioned one thing, that when I recorded my speakers, I made sure I had very good quality microphones. The second thing is in post-production, you have to really think about how you're going to mix all of your sound files together. So as you can see in this case, I have quite a few multiple sound files. I have the musical files, and I've added one here that I'll talk about in my sensors and redaction that I had to do for a couple different reasons. But one of the things you sometimes encounter is when you download your files from Zoom, and this is an example of this file right here, it's going to have an audio track on it. Okay, so you can actually work with that. Now, let's just jump to Zoom real quick to get a sense of what this looks like. So one of the things you can do in Zoom is really, this applies to my audio focus and my camera and multi-angle video focus for later. Make sure you have the settings set up such that you can download every single possible file. Audio only, your video file, which is shared screen, your gallery view, speaker view, everything. It's quite large, so for an hour and 11-minute workshop, 4 gigabytes. You're going to click download on this, and then you bring all these files into your video and audio production program. I'm using Final Cut Pro here. Some of you might use other programs. So one of the things you can do is create a scratch audio track. So what this means is when Sarah is speaking here, her scratch audio, I'll just play this.
Our contract that we have with students.
Let's turn up the volume of the original Zoom audio.
I really don't want to say,
You hear a little bit of delay there.
but I want to say contract bound, right?
I'll turn that off. And we call this scratch audio because basically what you're doing is the audio from your Zoom file is already embedded in your video file. And so we call it a scratch track because what we're going to do is sync these two together. So this is from my Zoom recorder. Again, that big recorder. This was the microphone right next to Sarah. So you can see that, or we lost that. It was on my Twitter page. Okay, here's that shot again. So again, this microphone is recording Sarah right here. So that's the higher quality is going into my Zoom R20. I then download that, my WAV file, and I sync it with my scratch track. What you basically do to sync is you do slight adjustments where you adjust one of your tracks left or right using your fine adjustment movement knob or button on your software. And then once these phase out, once they become unison, which typically happens, although with frame rate issues out there and recording technology, sometimes you do have some sync issues. So it's not always going to work perfectly, but I can generally get it pretty close. You can also go in programs like Final Cut Pro and sync clips together with the audio and also the video. So that's another option for you to sync some of this together. But the reason I want Sarah's high quality track obviously recorded on the XLR mic. So even though I have the audio here on this video track, I take that out. That becomes what we call our scratch audio track. And then the audio that you hear as a viewer or listener is this high quality audio. You may not know that. And one of the reasons I want to give this video overview is I sometimes hear people think like, it's lickety split. It's so quick and easy to make a great video. It's actually a huge amount of work again. And it takes skill. It takes a learning curve. Every one of these things is an edit. And then in addition to that, check this out. So one of the things that happened early in our workshop, and this is why the post-production world, if you know Solange, who's a Emmy-winning, Oscar-winning sound engineer, she could tell you about this, how it happens in the film industry. But one of the things that happened early on here is our audio had some challenges through the first 10 minutes. And it was really my issue. I forgot to mute my audio on my laptop, and a few of the other speakers forgot to mute theirs. So we had an echo going just because the audio is being picked up and is reverberating or echoing through 3 different speakers. So imagine as the audio is pinging or coming off of Sarah's computer, Katja's computer, and mine. You're going to get this reverberation, not just due to, say, the acoustics in the room. This is kind of a dead room, but you're going to get it because this microphone is picking up Sarah's audio, which is here, and then there's a delay picking up Katja's audio, and there may also be a delay built into the speaker depending on the Wi-Fi speed and what's happening with the output. So the best thing to do for good audio is to always have your speaker's audio off or to be using headphones. Headphones are tricky in a setup like this. I sometimes find it's like a fishbowl effect where you're very muffled like this just in terms of what you're hearing, your own voice. And I am personally challenged sometimes speaking in a microphone, doing a voiceover like this, which by the way, right now I'm not wearing headphones. It's challenging for me because sometimes I just can't hear my natural voice. So I don't always recommend using headphones. So what happened was we had this reverberation that we fortunately figured out within a few minutes. But what I had to do was I had to take Sarah's audio track here. And then this is super cool and slick, and I'm so happy. Thank you to the college. It was a little expensive, but it's so worth it. I've used this so many times already with cleaning up audio. So one of the things I can do is take Sarah's audio file here, pop it into iZotope RX Advanced, and then I can choose from any number of devices. What I used was D-Reverb, and it's very similar to D-Echo. So what I can do then is tell iZotope to take out the echo, and I did it. And I have to say, you didn't hear the original audio in this final video. It's absolutely amazing in terms of what it did. So to achieve good audio, there are some basic things you can do at the beginning, as I've suggested, that can involve using high quality XLR microphones and using a good recorder like this. But then in post-production, you have to sync audio. You also have to sometimes deal with bad audio. If you have speaker clicks, there's another module inside of iZotope that's a D-Click. They have a D-Wind. If you ever record in wind conditions, this is wonderful for outside stuff. It will take that away. D-Russell, the same thing. These are really wonderful. Again, fairly expensive, but if you're thinking at your college that you want to invest in some of these things, I really recommend iZotope. There's also a few artificial intelligence programs out there that in some ways can go even beyond iZotope RX9. So really amazing. I would just advise you again, focus on great audio because your audio is definitely going to make a difference in your final output. Now we're seeing right here kata from a different angle. So one of the things that I like to do with any of these videos is to record multiple angles. The good news is inside of Zoom, you have that ability. So as I showed you just a few minutes ago, if you go to your Zoom recordings, you can have all these various views. So there's a lot you don't have to do. Zoom will just record this all for you. Make sure you go into your Zoom settings and set up the advanced downloads. And basically, you're just going to see that and check every single box for all of these views. What I like to say is you download all these, you don't have to use them all. I don't use every single view that I get from Zoom, but I have those options. So right here, I can get Kata's camera view right from our computer. And then I also use this one. I zoomed in here a little bit, which I believe is the same angle as this one here. And it also is a, at some point I have it in here, a gallery view. You'll see that I think at the end of the video where all of us are speaking right here. So the nice thing about Zoom is you're going to get these views together. If you're doing syncing, one of my pro tips here is to say, try to get your Zoom files downloaded. Those can include audio and video. Download if you have additional views, and in this particular case, I have this camera view, which is my iPhone set up on a tripod just behind Sarah. So I have it set up right here, kind of in this area. You can't see it, and then that's just capturing. I really liked Sarah's dual screen view, and as a video person, I'm like, that's going to be cool in post-production. We're going to see it's participatory, and I'm suggesting in this section that you want to have multiple camera angles and views for the interest of your audience. If you watched, like recently I watched Metallica was on tour and they did a couple shows in San Francisco that were played on Amazon Live, and if you see a concert at home, it's not the same as being there, but at least in that Metallica concert, I really appreciated the multiple camera angles. So you can kind of do this on the cheap. Zoom, again, will give you some angles. You can set up a couple of iPhones or other cameras, like action cameras you might have, GoPros, etc., and then get these other angles. What you then need to do is sync everything. This is multiple steps, so you're syncing audio and video together. And then one of the things that's kind of cool is you can start with your main non-zoom camera. So that's my iPhone right here. That also has audio, and that becomes a scratch track for your audio. So what I do is I set that up as my first camera on my timeline in my video program. Then I go in and set up all my good audio. And these are, again, the WAV files from my non-zoom recording, so from my good microphones. Then what I do is I go in and I take my one Zoom file. So I might have 5 Zoom files downloaded. I take one of these. Again, I bring up the audio. My computer is being extremely slow right now, but if I bring up one of these files, the Zoom audio track will appear here. You can't see it right now. It's just my computer's being really slow. But what's cool about that is you set up your first Zoom video file. Then all you have to do is put your header right here, wherever your first Zoom video starts, line up all your other Zoom videos, and then you don't have to sync all those individually. You can also do things with compound clips and other things depending on your video software. So I like to recommend having a lot of different camera angles. In post-production, you can also do zooms like I did here. So I took that gallery view, which you see here, and then I just zoomed in a little bit such that we could get Kata, and we were joking beforehand, we actually set up the camera and we looked at it, and then Kata and Sarah moved the cat here just to give it some visual appeal. So you'll notice sometimes when you zoom in post-production, it's a little more grainy and it lacks some of the definition and resolution. That's because of just the recording in Zoom, and also as we start to zoom in, literally, we sometimes discover that we get like pixelization or aliasing that happens with the resolution or quality of the video. Not a huge deal. I think most viewers are pretty forgiving. So that's kind of just some tips there on cameras and angles and the need to have multiple cameras and angles to make your content even more interesting after the fact. And the other thing I'll say about that too is this serves the purpose of having a backup. So what if one of your camera fails? If this is the only camera that I use to record my session and I forget to hit record, which I've done a million times in the past, I don't have any video, so I want redundancy. So the fact that when we recorded this, we knew we were going to get 4 different cameras going, Sarah's camera, Kata's camera, my camera here, and I had actually a separate camera set up in this area that you can't see. So I actually had 2 cameras, so 4 different cameras here, plus the 5th one, which is my iPhone. Have that redundancy set up ahead of time with your video and audio, because if you forget to do something or one of your audio or video sources is bad, you need a backup. Otherwise, you might have to reshoot it if you really want a video archive. And this actually happened to this, so check this out. This was just a great opportunity here. At this point in the video, when you listen to it, you're going to see, or you're going to hear that, I think it's this point in the video, that Sarah's audio gets a little muffled. And the reason for that was I was recording on my Zoom recorder, my R20, and what happened was the Zoom recorder was maxed out in terms of the length of the file. So I had to start a new audio file. Because of that, I had the scratch audio available. So at that point in the video, I just pulled up the audio on the Zoom video file, and then I used that for Sarah's audio. So you'll hear that at one point, but again, because I had that backup and redundancy, I didn't have to cut the video, given the fact that maybe we would have lost Sarah's audio completely had I not had a backup source. So another tip there in terms of redundancy and backups. Now, I also want to mention, you're seeing it right here, the ability to do blurs and censoring in post-production. So I like to do this. So you can see right here that Sarah is speaking, and she's the main speaker. There's no reason for me to be seen. And in the future, I'd probably be off screen, but this was the best place in terms of my setup here to be able to capture their audio. I had kind of short XLR cords here, and I also wanted to be in the middle of things. The only disadvantage is with Sarah's camera, we didn't zoom it, you're picking me up, which is a little distracting. So one way around that is I try to blur in post-production. It's very easy to do. I just use a blur feature here, but this blur filter allows me to control where the blur is. So obviously I don't want to blur much of Sarah's face, so I stomp it here and here. I have the height maximized, and the width is basically depending on where I am and trying to just blur me out. It's distracting for someone to watch this and to see me if I'm motioning or whatever, so that helps a little bit. I can also crop in. I don't like cropping as much, so I could take Sarah's clip and I could go in and do a little bit of work to make her face appear more. I could crop her face a little bit more, but sometimes I find like it's too close, and you just need kind of those rules about art and composition, having other things in the screen. So I don't like a face that's just cropped right dead in the center and that fills up most of your screen, particularly as we're in 16:9 or widescreen versus the old days of 4:3 when we watched TV, like for me as a kid. Now in my 50s, I remember those old days. We're used to having things appear here in the 16:9 widescreen format. Now, the other reason I recommend doing blurs and sensors is you often have sensitive information that pops up. So we had one case here where Kata wanted to show and play Enrique Iglesias, a video. And the problem with this is if I put this up on YouTube, the video and the audio will get stricken, and I will have to take the video down. So what I did was I just put in generic stock music that I created here and put a note up here to explain to the viewer the audio and video were redacted due to copyright. So it's unfortunate we can't hear it, but the YouTube censors are amazingly powerful and those algorithms. So that is really important just to do that if you know you're going to have a situation where somebody is going to be playing something that is going to be potentially stricken by YouTube. Now here's a second reason for FERPA. So Sarah showed information on the screen and had a student's face and likeness and also some names. So what I do in post-production, it's very time consuming but worth it. I find the frames where the speaker is, say, a student, and I blur out that section. So I have a simple sensor filter that allows me to control where this appears on the screen. I don't want to cut out Sarah's face. You can still see what's going on as a viewer. However, the names, the likenesses of the students are clearly redacted. So one of the reasons I really advise people about not using direct Zoom files is you might actually have a FERPA violation when this is playing for the world. This is one of the more time-consuming parts of my job, doing the audio and the video, along with that audio production stuff I mentioned with cleaning things up and dealing with de-echoing and stuff. But this part is super important. You got to do it for FERPA. So if any of you from LTCC have questions about that or need some help, I'd be happy to go in and really help you with your FERPA sensors and blurs. So another tip there, just in terms of working with some of the audio, or in this case actually working with the video and the audio in terms of taking it out for the YouTube censoring issues. Let's talk about movement as well. So again, I advise you to set up different camera angles. One of the cool things you can do inside of Final Cut Pro is use a so-called Ken Burns filter. So what this allows you to do is basically to go in and set up movement in your clip. So this tells you, this is not a good example. I wouldn't do it here, but we're just doing it for the sake of, let's say, seeing how movement works. So let's say at the end of this clip, Sarah's primarily talking. Well, movement here will create some, sense of interest on the part of the viewer. So check out how this works. I just hit the play button, and you'll see, again, forget about the audio. I'll just take out the audio there. But imagine if Sarah was speaking towards the end of this clip. As the movement happens, then we get closer and closer to Sarah, and then that brings visually Sarah into focus to go along with her audio. So any opportunities out there to create movement, if you have a long clip with someone speaking, let's say, viewers are different, but let's say one of my speakers here is going through a really long segment, using a shared screen here, going through and talking. If I may have a reason to leave this static, and I typically do because Sarah is talking about things on this screen. Movement in this case will distract, in my opinion, the viewer from what Sarah is trying to teach us pedagogically. So this is not a case where I do use movement. But if Sarah was primarily just talking, and let's say there was a static image, in her case, there's a ton of movement already, and it's content-specific movement, so I want to leave that as a video producer in the end. And she has so much happening here. She's doing the work for me. So in post-production, this is a wonderful section because for all these minutes, for like 3 or 4 minutes, Sarah's doing the work for me. All right, she's scrolling through, she's talking, she's energetic, of course, if you know Sarah, very engaging. And as a result of this, I don't have a lot of work to do. I love that. It's great when a speaker is this dynamic. If the speaker is not dynamic, or if there isn't movement on the screen because of the context of the screen sharing, what I recommend to you is then you go in and do one of those Ken Burns moves where you set up movement, and then that way it makes it a little easier for the viewer, just because sometimes viewers get bored. Believe me, as people were watching this video, they weren't getting bored because of that preparation. And it leads me to a second to last point here. It is having great content. If you have great content along with great speakers, you as a video producer, as an audio producer in the end, have very little work to do. They're doing the work for you because, again, it's compelling, it's interesting. They're sharing with us different tips. They're showing us all this stuff in Canvas, different apps, Marco Polo, and so forth. So it's not a lot of work that you have to do if you have great speakers who've prepared and they're ready to share it with all of you. And then you simply do the edits and the stuff that need to be done outside of, say, some of that great content and great preparation of your speakers. Now, my last point is, Some of the stuff is easy, but there is a learning curve. For some of this, you'll need software. For some of this, certainly you'll need time and energy to learn some of these tips I've talked about today. I would never go back to my old days of just doing stuff really simple. I like the complexity of it. Again, it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. And again, there is evidence out there that all this work that we do when we create these videos and we do the audio and video work is worth it in the end, because it takes the incredible work that was done by Kata and Sarah here and it maximizes it. It pushes it beyond its potential. And that's why I say, just like that Metallica concert, if you want to do something that's captivating and engaging, seriously think about taking great speakers and great content and advancing it or augmenting it even beyond that great content that was presented in the workshop that you might have recorded. I think it's just super important, and not everyone will have this skill, but if you have questions or ideas and you want to reach out to me here at the college, let me know. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. But I wanted to take this opportunity, since it's so fresh, to really talk about this video I created here using the great material from Kata and Sarah as they talked about creating welcoming and immersive DE classes. So I hope you get the chance to watch the video that they did. Really great information for all of you to learn from. And if you have any other questions, reach out to me and we can set up a time to talk about more tips on doing more advanced levels of audio and video production for your workshops that you might be recording and organizing. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with additional videos.